Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Wednesday. This is Seattle Now. Seattle's social housing test will soon become a reality. The city's voter-approved social housing developer is working to fill an apartment near Pike Place Market with mixed-income tenants. The deadline to apply for a spot in the housing lottery is this Friday. Seattle Times real estate reporter Heidi Groover is here to fill us in. But first, let's get you caught up. The regulation of large data centers is before the Seattle City Council today. A committee will vote at 9:30 this morning on a one-year emergency moratorium. Several companies recently approached the city about building 5 large-scale data centers in Seattle. If the committee approves the bill today, the full council could vote on a moratorium as early as next week. Seattle Humane is lowering adoption fees for dogs and some cats for the next month. Axios reports the shelter is dealing with decreased demand and requests to take on animals from other shelters at capacity. Adoption fees for all dogs at the shelter are discounted, as well as cats between 6 months and 7 years old. Some long-term shelter pets even have name-your-own adoption fees. And time to get your song in. Beloved karaoke and food spot Busch Garden is reopening today. It originally closed in 2020 as a result of the pandemic, and its reopening has been delayed about 2 years. Busch Garden's new location is just a few blocks from the old one in the Chinatown International District. The festivities begin this afternoon with a ribbon cutting at 3 p.m. We'll be back with more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. Seattle's social housing developer is buying their first building. The idea is to fill the apartment complex near Pike Place with mixed-income tenants. The organization's interim CEO, Tiffany McCoy, announced the purchase at a recent event on the waterfront.
All told, we estimate we will be creating 60 units of deeply affordable housing in Belltown this year that would not have existed otherwise.
The deadline to apply for a lottery to live in those units is Friday. Heidi Groover covered this development for the Seattle Times. She's a real estate reporter there, and she's here to help us understand what this step could mean for advocates of social housing in the city. Heidi, thanks a lot for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
So help us explain the social housing model. What is it and what makes it unique?
Well, like you mentioned, it's mixed income. So as opposed to types of affordable housing that are all for a certain income level, all for people who have low incomes, this is mixed income housing where people with very low incomes will live in the same building as people with quite high incomes. And the purpose of that is severalfold. It's to not segregate people with low incomes only into certain parts of the city or certain buildings. It's also that the rents from higher paying tenants help to subsidize lower rents for people with lower incomes. And this is a common model in Europe, but it's more new to the United States. And supporters want to take more housing off of the private market and have it be publicly owned, and in this case, to remain affordable forever.
As we mentioned at the top there, this is the first apartment purchase by the Seattle social housing developer. How do they actually plan to lease the space? Because there are already people living in the building.
Yes, there are already people living there, and they've launched an online lottery, which is open through this Friday. And anyone who makes up to 80% of area median income, which is about $92,000 for a single person in Seattle, can apply to live in this building. They did in the first week or so that the lottery was open, they got almost 2,000 applicants. So they will select people from that lottery, and they will start with people with the lowest incomes. So they have a handful of vacancies in the building now, and they expect, more to become vacant in the coming months just through regular turnover that any building experiences. And so the first people to get apartments in the building through the lottery will be people with the lowest income. That's less than 30% of area median income, which means you're earning about $34,000 as a single person. That will be the first 15 units in the building. And then the next 45 that come available will be at that next level of affordability, up to half of area median income or about $57,000 for a single person. So the goal here, as you can see, is to eventually end up with this mix of incomes all the way from the lowest all the way to the highest income renters. And as you mentioned, there are people already living in the building. They're not kicking anyone out of the building. They're promising not to displace people. I think quite the opposite. They really want people to stay. I think if anything, they're a little worried that people might be spooked by this new model and might leave. And so to try to incentivize people to stay in the building, they are going to freeze the rents for the existing tenants for 2 years. They're also going to give them a 1-year transit pass and get rid of some fees that the tenants are currently paying. So you see them trying to open up units for new people with lower incomes and also keep some of the people who currently live in the building.
What is the current rent in the building, and what is the anticipated rent for somebody who is at the highest assistance level?
This is a high-end building. It's downtown, basically Belltown, not far from Pike Place. So today, for a 1-bedroom in the building, the rents available online for empty apartments range from about $1,800 to $2,500 for a 1-bedroom apartment. And so the rents will vary depending on the income level, of course. But for people with the lowest incomes, that 1-bedroom could be as low as about $700. And then in that next tier of low income, it could be about $1,300 for that 1-bedroom. And then, it goes up from there. So there will be a wide range of rents, but certainly lower than what the building is today for people with qualifying incomes.
I'm wondering, what did the social housing developer pay for this building, and what is the math on the other end that needs to happen to make this model work, even in just this building?
Right. They paid about $61 million for the building, and a bit of it remains to be seen exactly how long it takes them to reach this income mix and how successful they are at having those higher rents offset the subsidy for the lower rents. That's the idea in the long term, but this is their first test case of their example of this type of affordable housing. And it's also worth noting that the funding to buy this building and eventually build and construct new affordable housing comes from a city tax on employers that pay employees more than $1 million. So if a company has an employee making more than $1 million, they pay a tax just on the portion of their salary over $1 million. And that's what's funding the social housing developer to buy this building and eventually build new buildings.
Okay, that's the math a little bit. The social housing goal is for renters with much different incomes to cohabitate, as we've been talking about. Are you anticipating tensions within this model, Heidi?
I think it's hard to know for sure. I think there will certainly be people who have preconceived notions about what it means to live in this type of housing, or who just simply thought they were signing up for one thing when they moved in and now it's different. And there will be people who move for completely unrelated reasons and who would have moved anyway. I did stop by the building on the day that this was announced and tried to catch a few people coming in and out. And it was a small sample size, just anecdotal, but the people I spoke with, they were surprised to learn about this, but they were generally supportive. They themselves have experienced struggling to afford rent in Seattle, and so they liked the idea that, a building downtown in this neighborhood that they really like could be accessible to more people. I didn't talk to everyone in the building, but I think there's probably a mix of perspectives.
This has been a long time coming. Seattleites voted to create the social housing developer 3 years ago, and more than a year ago, they passed a tax on businesses, like you mentioned, to fund it. Tell me about the slow ramp up and the hurdles that the organization has faced since its inception.
So it is a new organization that they've been getting off the ground, and there have been some, disputes on the board. The first CEO of the developer was fired, and there were some issues with slow access to funding to ramp up the organization. And there are people, some in the business community, who are just skeptical of giving this much money to what they call an untested developer. But voters approved it. It is launched, it is operating, and it has now purchased this building. And so I think this is a moment where the social housing developer really wants to prove that they can make their model work, that they are doing things with this tax revenue, that they're getting the ball rolling. And so they face a lot of tests, not just whether this building will be successful, but what happens when they start actually developing their own new housing. But right now, I think they're in a moment of really wanting to prove themselves.
What are critics saying about this model?
The most prominent criticism throughout the last few years of the conversation about whether voters should approve this and the funding source has been around the concern being, do we really need another agency that's working on housing, that's building a new type of housing? Maybe we just need more funding for the affordable housing apparatus that already exists. Some people believe the focus should be exclusively on the very lowest income people and not more moderate income renters. Some in the business community didn't like the tax and worried about the effect it might have on some of our employers. And a smaller critique, but one that is out there, is that, we shouldn't be buying up existing buildings. We should only be developing new and adding to the housing stock. But, voters did approve creating the developer and funding it. So it's at this point time to see what happens.
What did the social housing developer say about buying market housing instead of building housing?
They definitely see both things as core to their mission. They don't only want to buy existing housing, but they believe that it's really important to take buildings off the private speculative real estate market so that you don't worry about a new owner coming in and jacking up the rents or tearing down the building to build something that's even more expensive. And that by having public ownership, you have some guarantee of affordability into the future. This is also, a nice, high-end, relatively new building. And I think supporters also argue that everyone deserves to live in that type of housing and that we shouldn't be segregating people based on their income to housing that's in worse condition.
We're going to need a lot more than 60 units to address affordable housing in the city. Heidi, what needs to happen next here?
Well, we definitely need thousands of new units of affordable housing, especially at the very lowest end of the income spectrum. That's a huge need that is sort of a broad city and regional discussion about how to pay for that and how to do it at scale. And I think the social housing developer is a part of this.
It is also a shared issue around here that the cost of rent is exorbitant for many, many people in this city. So a shared concern as well. Heidi, what are you watching for next?
I think we are going to see another acquisition. The social housing developer will buy another building at some point in the coming months, and then they will start announcing properties where they want to build. So I think I'm interested to see how that ramps up and also how quickly they can get these affordable units at this building online, how quickly they get to that mix of incomes and how it goes once people have moved in.
Yeah. Seattle Times business reporter Heidi Groover, thanks so much for chatting.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Seattle Now, and make sure to join us this Saturday for a live taping of the show. I'll interview King County Executive Girmay Zahilay at the Cascade PBS Ideas Festival. You can get tickets at cascadepbs.org/Ideas Festival or click that link in the show notes. Either way, make sure you use promo code Seattle Now for a deep 20% discount. Who loves you, baby? Today's episode was produced by Anna Marie Yanni. It was edited by Andy Hurst. Our production team also includes Caroline Chamberlain Gomez, Vaughn Jones, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. Talk to you tonight for Evening Headlines.